you. Welcome to the O Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, CW, and I had a question for all of you wonderful wrestling fans. How do you feel about quote-unquote goofy wrestling gimmicks? I was reading the SmackDown recap by the Cage Side Seats website. If you haven't been there before, go check them out, cagesideseats.com, part of the SB Nation. The article written by a person named Gino, shout out to Gino, asked the question how people felt about the Viking Raiders and their new packaging with, I believe, Sarah Logan coming back, calling herself Valhalla, doing a lot more cinematic vignettes backstage to kind of make themselves look cool. And he mentioned that he wasn't a big fan of their sort of whole shtick. And he said, mileage may vary. And it made me think, how do I feel about such, I called it goofy, but it's more spectacular or over the top. I mean, how do you even quantify over the top of professional wrestling? I would say more fantastical, I think. Like The Undertaker is very fantastical, right? He has supernatural powers, but he's a professional wrestler that obeys the rules of the ring. So it's Kane is a burn victim with a mask, but he's got some kind of supernatural powers. He could set fire to the ring or something. Those are the kind of fantastical things. And over the years, WWE has shifted its focus more towards wrestlers being people than very larger than life gimmicks. Like they wanted to lean further into the actual person than their occupation or their powers or whatever. But the Viking Raider, before we go to the Viking Raiders, there's every generation or every new crop, there's always an act that is a little bit of a throwback to the 80s when you had people like Legion of Doom or something, where they were just very big, very I was gonna say boisterous, but that's not the right word, very loud. I don't know the word to describe them. Very animated. They feel very like they're plucked out of a comic book. And the Viking Raiders, I feel, are that for this crop of NXT people who came up last year. And was it last year or the year before? I don't remember. But in reference to Gino in their article, I tend to agree only because they are always surrounded by regular people, right? And then to call themselves Vikings is it's like a historical thing that does not exist anymore. Like Vikings don't, well, as far as I know, Vikings no longer roam and pillage and take over stuff. So it's hard to invest myself in their gimmick, even when WWE and the creative team go super hard on it. And now I might be contradicting myself because I am all about gimmicks, at least diving headfirst. As scratch that. I appreciate the fact that they have taken the next step to making the Viking Raiders legitimate. They have kind of done away with some of the goofy elements that they had. They kind of retooled their ring gear. They have movesets that are starting to gel and vibe like a tag team, so that's good. They added Sarah Logan back, who's a great talent. And they leaned a little harder into like the historical nature of this, where we are meant to believe that they are actually Vikings, which I guess is fun, but it does make it difficult to take seriously when these Viking Raiders are wrestling like the Usos, who are just guys. The Usos don't proclaim themselves to be, ancient Samoan deities or anything. They're just, brothers who like super kicking people. So it's always such a stark contrast when the Viking Raiders wrestle anyone. I'm not going to say I don't like them, but I am not yet on board with their whole we're Vikings gimmick. But I do appreciate the fact that they have taken like the extra step to make it even more like, hey, we're Viking Raiders. Let's go. Let's turn it up to 12. Let's amp it up. So, kudos to them for going the extra mile. I do appreciate their wrestling style. I like their big man, powerhouse wrestling style. And honestly, if there was anyone to dethrone the Usos, they might be the most fun option versus the sort of makeshift tag team that Drew McIntyre and Sheamus have become. And whatever, I'm sure Braun Strowman and Ricochet will enter that tag team tournament for some reason. But the Usos have to drop the belt to somebody. And if they really want to make a play of it, I think Viking Raiders might be the most fun option. I don't know if it's the best option long term, but they'll definitely be the most fun option, because if you put the tag titles on them on this sort of over the top gimmick, you open yourself to having more interesting matches where they are then justified, right? Like their whole shtick is that they pray to the gods, and the gods talk through Sarah Logan, aka Valhalla, and then she tells them what they're meant to do, right? So if that is the case, if they win the titles, then you justify and legitimize their claim that they talk to the gods, which, it's professional wrestling. You can have fun with that. And with that, and then someone like Bray Wyatt sort of moving themselves back into the Eater of Worlds gimmick or whatever the heck they're trying to do, they have these, two very over-the-top gimmicks that are, I think, getting over. You have more interesting time on TV, I think. It's more fun to watch, I would say. The gimmick the gimmick mileage may vary, as Gino said on Cage Side, but the fun aspect of it does, the fun quotient goes up, right? And it's for kids, honestly. It's not just for us. It's for, a new generation. And there's some kid out there like, that's so cool. Some kid played Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and then they see the Viking Raiders and they're like, I'm in. It has to be, right? So yeah, I'm for that, but yeah, the gimmick is really, they took it to 12, and it's weird in comparison to just regular tag teams or regular people walking around in the back. I mean, could you imagine like you're just walking around backstage and then two quote unquote Vikings walk by the craft services table? It's just, but it's professional wrestling. So what do you care? Bray Wyatt does fall a little bit into that category, and I feel the angle that they're taking with Bray Wyatt and kind of like cutting the lights out and Uncle Howdy doing all his weird stuff and then cutting the commercial and then coming back and then everyone just being gone. Like this past SmackDown, Bray Wyatt showed up, sat in the ring for 2 minutes, said a couple old lines, and then they cut over to a backstage segment with Sami Zayn and KO, and when they cut back to the ring, the chair was gone, Bray Wyatt was gone, everything was back to normal. And it's like, again, this fantasticalness of the whole thing. Also, Bray Wyatt's entrance is way too long for him to be in the ring for 1 minute. Half of his segment, they're like, all right, you have a 6-minute segment, 4.5 minutes of the segment is him trying to get to the ring. Just, they need to speed that entrance up. I mean, I like the song and everything, but get a quicker cut. It's killing me. But his gimmick does kind of fall into the Viking Raiders-esque thing. But I think the difference is Bray Wyatt's gimmicks are usually more based in like mental instability versus like ancient lore. Anyway, what do you guys think of quote-unquote goofy wrestling gimmicks? Let me know in the comments. Make sure to strike the bell. I'm trying to think of wrestling terms to use. Hit that bell. Subscribe to the podcast on any and all podcasting platforms. You can visit us on Instagram as well at o.wrestling. Thanks so much for listening. I truly, truly appreciate you. I am going to go lift some weights, but never forget,
I'm your friend, but if I ever see you in the ring, I can beat you. Don't you know? Yeah, yeah, yeah.